Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing my cards I made using Queen & Company's brand new Sweet Shop kit. This is a full kit that includes a paper pad, exclusive toppings, foam and acetate pieces, a ton of dies, and a great sentiment stamp set. I will have links in the description box below if you are interested in any of the products that I show during this video. Since the kit does include a full 6x6 paper pad, I decided to use my 6x6 tutorial and finish off all of the pattern paper. Although for this video, I'm only going to show the process of making one card for every sketch. So let's go ahead and get started with my first set of cards. I'm using the November 2016 sketch by Viva la Verve. In addition to the Sweet Shop kit, I'm also including the Sweet Shop Solids 6x6 paper, which is just a solid color pattern paper feel. This isn't a cardstock, but the colors coordinate perfectly with the pattern paper. And then I also have the outline dies that go really nicely with the dies that are included in the kit, and I love using them for the backgrounds of the shaker cards. So I'll be showing those along the way. And since I love to use a lot of layers on my cards, I'm also including quite a bit of solid colored cardstock. And I'll have all of those colors listed on my coordinating blog post if you're interested in purchasing those when you're using the kit yourself. One of my favorite things about using Queen & Company's paper pads is they have a nice mix of busy patterns along with those muted or tone-on-tone designs. So it makes it really easy to mix several different pattern papers on one card without those patterns competing with one another. So for this card, I have that busier pattern paper in the background, and then I'm using some of the tone-on-tone and also some of the solids for those strips going down the middle or off to the left-hand side. I'm just going to add some twine on the top portion of the card. I wrapped the twine around the card twice, and then I adhered the ends behind this card front using some red line tape. I'm going to put a whole bunch of adhesive on the back of this card front, attach it to my card base, and for this card I do have just that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. I think it looks nice with these brighter colors, the pattern paper, since there's a lot of white in them already. Now for this circle element on the sketch, I'm going to use one of the shakers that's included in the kit, and I'm going to make a little donut. I used the outline die to cut out the brown background of the donut, and then I also cut out just that small white circle since I didn't want that blue strip to show through the whole of the donut. I like to have that white behind instead. So I attached the foam, and this donut is 2 different pieces. So it has the very outside frame, and then it also has the little hole. So you have 2 different foam pieces to adhere. I'm going to fill that up with an assortment of shaker toppings. I'm using the shaker toppings that are included in the kit, and then I'll also be including some other ones that you can purchase individually from Queen & Company. Mostly the pops and the pearlies is what I used in this video. I used Queen & Company's sheer glue to adhere the donut frame, and then I just have my acrylic block sitting on top to let that glue dry. While that was drying, I stamped out the sentiment, and this is, "I do not know what I'd do without you." Queen & Company always has such fun sentiment stamp sets. They have great little sayings, and the fonts are wonderful. And you cannot purchase the stamp sets or the dies individually, but you can buy refills. You can buy the paper pad, the foam pieces, and then also those toppings. So you can make those kits last even longer once you use up all the items that were originally included in the kit. So I love having the refills so you can just keep using those kits. When I decided on the placement of the sentiment, then I could add the little bow with the twine. I usually wait until I decide if it's going to look better on the right or left hand side. And now just to finish off the card, I'm using an assortment of Queen & Company bling. They have some new epoxy dots in 3 different designs, and then they also have their plain design. So a lot of great variety with bling. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this sketch. So now moving on to the next set of cards, I used a sketch from OWH. This is number 161. And I do get asked quite often where I find these sketches, and I find them from a variety of different online websites that provide free sketches. Some have measurements included, others don't. I do figure out the measurements myself for A2 size cards. And if you are interested in any of the sketches that I share, I have all of that information on my coordinating blog post, and that link is in the description box below. Sometimes I follow the sketches very closely, and other times it's really just a little bit of inspiration, and then I change it up as I need. For this card, I decided to round those bottom two corners. I think it adds a little bit of softness to the card. I did add a scrap of cardstock underneath that top portion of the oval just to keep it nice and even on the card. So I like to adhere my card front onto my card base before I start building my shaker component, just because it gets a little harder to adhere when you're trying to add adhesive with that extra dimension from the shaker. For this card, I'm using the milkshake, or I guess it could be like an ice cream float. I used the gray solids to cut out the glass, and that first piece is using an outline die. And I made the ice cream blue. I'm not sure what flavor that would be, maybe a blue raspberry or something, but I liked the blue color. And then I adhered the straw before I put down the foam piece. That way it's inside of the glass. And then I added a cherry on top of that blue ice cream. And this is so fun. The kit even includes the stem of the cherry. So now I'll go ahead and add some of the shaker toppings using some of the confetti, a little bit of the sprinkles, and then adding some pearlies as well. And I decided to do all of those in yellow and then just the white pearlies. So you remove the backing on that front piece of the foam. You can attach the acetate, make sure all of those shaker toppings stay sealed. And then you can add the frame, let that dry for a little bit. And I did go ahead and stamp most of the sentiments for the cards on this video just to save on time. I used some of the pink solids to stamp Make a Wish, and then I just cut a little diagonal on the very end instead of my normal fishtail. I thought it looked a little nicer with the card. And then just using some of that same blue cardstock that I used for the border, the little wavy border at the bottom. I have those two dots at the very top. And those are actually from the donut die. It's just that little inside hole. So I thought that was very useful. It's a perfect size to embellish your card. And then just finishing off the card, adding that assortment of Queen & Company bling. And I do like to add just that thin piece of pattern paper on the inside of the card just for a little extra detail. So I made 2 cards using this sketch. So moving on to the next card, I used a sketch from OWH. This was one of their bonus sketches, and it's number 29. I selected a tone-on-tone pattern paper with diagonal stripes for the background, and then just a little piece of this polka dot paper for the very bottom. This rectangle in the center, I used one of Queen & Company's foundation dies to cut out this stitched rectangle. And I did just trim off that bottom portion because it was a little longer than I needed. And you can see there's a little gap between that rectangle and then that polka dot paper. But it's all going to be covered up with the sentiment, which I'm also adding another one of Queen & Company's border dies, a little scallop border right below that, just for some extra detail. Then I'll adhere this panel onto this blue cardstock, and then I'll attach that card front onto a card base. And I do use quite a bit of adhesive. I donate a lot of my cards, and I just want to make sure that they stay together. It would just make me so sad if that card was given to somebody and it fell apart. Now on this card, I'm going to use the cupcake shaker. I love that the little wrapper has stitched lines going up and down just to give a nice detail. And I selected the pink polka dot paper for the frosting, because who wouldn't want pink frosting on their cupcake? I did use the outline die for that background piece, and I'm going to add some sprinkles and then also some of the pops. I like to stick with the colors that are already in my card, but I decided not to add any of that teal blue color this time because this cupcake's just going to be the yellow, white, and pink. So go ahead and seal all of that in place, let that glue dry, Now to embellish the card, I use some small circle dies that have that stitched edging to them, and these are all Queen & Company foundation die sets. One of those circles, I use some of Queen & Company's pink glitter foam, and this is self-adhesive. I did attach just a small piece of cardstock on the right-hand side underneath that glitter circle, just to keep it nice and even on the card. And I'm just going to finish off the card using some Queen & Company bling. I always have a nice assortment. I tend to stick with 3 different styles of bling. I'd like to have the different sizes as well. I think it balances out the card nicely. So I did make 2 cards using this sketch. Now moving on to the next set of cards. This is a sketch from Viva la Verve. It's their November 2014 design. I used the blue polka dot paper for the background, and then I have a couple other pattern papers along with a little strip of this orange solids. I don't want to have too many pattern papers together. Most of the time I like to layer all of the pieces using the same color cardstock, but for some cards I like to use a different color. So on these pink pattern papers, I decided to layer those in the pink cardstock and then just use the blue for the background. I'm using some of those scraps of cardstock just to keep all of my pieces nice and even. When you have all of those extra layers, it does add that little bit of dimension, and you'll notice those, like that pink polka dot piece would kind of be going off of the edge, and you even see a little bit of a crease where it goes on the very edge of that banner. So I don't like that look, so just great way to use up some of those small scraps of pattern paper. So for this card, I'm going to add some twine to the top of the card using the pink color. Just wrapped it twice around the card, usually do 2 times around the card. Adhere it to the back using Queen & Company's red line tape. And sometimes when I have the twine really close to the top of the card, I'll also add a piece of red line tape there as well, just because I don't want it to pull away. I don't want that card front to pull away from the card base. I'm going to tie my bow, putting it on the left-hand side of the card, and now I'll start assembling my shaker. So this one is going to be a little ice cream sundae. So I cut out that dish using the gray solids, and the ice cream I cut out using some of the brown solids, since it's going to be all a chocolate ice cream. For the sentiment, I decided to stamp it directly onto the card. I always take that chance of doing it at the last minute. It's usually better to do it before you start assembling all of these other pieces, just in case it doesn't stamp nicely. But it was just fine. For the shaker toppings, I used a couple that are included in the kit along with some of the ombre pearls. I thought the colors looked really nicely with the brown and the pink. So I'm going to seal those in place, and as you can see, a few of them jumped out on me. No problem, it's easy to peel up right away. I'll glue on the frame of the ice cream, and then the kit includes one die that you can add the sauces to your ice cream, hot fudge sundaes, strawberry, caramel. I thought that was really fun. So I have 3 different colors since I needed all 3 flavors on my ice cream sundae. I'm going to add a cherry on top, put that tiny little stem. I got a little bit extra glue around the stem. It's a very small piece, so be careful you don't get too much glue on there. But I just wiped it away immediately, so that's no problem. I'll just finish off the card using another assortment of Queen & Company bling. I love these new epoxy dots. For this card, I used the candy swirl style. Thought that looked really nicely with the card. So there are the 2 cards I made using this sketch. So now moving on to the next set of cards. This is a sketch from MFT. It's number 352. I used the bold diagonal stripe paper for the background. And then for this strip going across that lower portion of the card, I'm using some polka dot paper. Now the scrap of paper that I wanted to use for this card wasn't actually long enough to go all the way across. So not a problem, I just cut it about 2/3 of the way down and then left that little gap in a spot that wouldn't be shown on the card since it's going to be covered up by this rectangle. And I did use some white pearlescent paper for this white piece, Most of the white paper you see behind all of my shaker components is actually pearlescent paper. I think it adds a nice shimmer to the card. Now for this card, I'm going to assemble this darling little ice cream donut truck, whatever kind of truck you want it to be. It could be a taco truck. That's what I've heard some people talk about. So that'd be really cute. There are several dies needed to make this truck, so you can really customize it. You could do it all one color. You could do several colors. I decided to have it the teal and then the yellow. The wheels are separate, and I wanted to pop those up. They're not quite the same dimension as the foam for the shaker kit, but I do want to have a little bit of dimension, so I'm just using some of the regular foam tape, and I put 2 pieces, so they're just slightly lower than the rest of the foam. So I'm going to fill up that truck with an assortment of shaker toppings. And there is an outline die for the truck as well, but I decided to have the white in the background. I think that still looked just fine. Once I attach the acetate, then I can just start assembling the truck, just using some liquid adhesive. For the hubcap of the tires, this is that same small circle from the inside of the donut hole die. It's always fun to look for a second purpose for some of the dies. There are the little tiny bumpers, and they're kind of hard to pick up, so I did use my jewel picker tool just for ease of placing them on the vehicle. I stamped out the sentiment on a stitched banner die cut. This is from one of Queen & Company's foundation die sets. They currently have 5 different sets, and it's a great assortment of different dies to help embellish your cards. So I also layered that banner on some of the dark teal cardstock just to have it pop out just a little more. And then I'm using some small stitched circles just to add underneath that sentiment. I'm just trying to figure out placement. A few of them I'm going to pop up with some foam dimensional tape, and this is just some really thin foam squares. Trying to keep it nice and even on the card since it's going on top of all of these other layers. On just that top edge of the sentiment banners, I'm using some of the thin foam squares, and then I'll use some liquid adhesive for that lower portion. And then it's nice and even on the card. Although I did notice just that very bottom corner was kind of sagging down. So just add one more foam square. And then I'm going to add one more of the small stitched circles to the lower portion of the card just to add a little balance to the overall look. Finish off the card with an assortment of Queen & Company bling. I have some more of the epoxy dots, some petite pearlies, and then also some of their iridescent bubbles. So there is the finished card, and I did make 2 using this sketch. So now moving on to the next set of cards. This is a sketch from Sweet Sunday. This is number 151. And this is my favorite card from the whole set, and not just because it's mostly pink. I used some sprinkle paper for the background, but you can see it's just a frame. Since most of this paper is going to be covered up, I decided to use one of the rectangle dies and cut out that other portion. That way I can use it on another card. It's just a great way to stretch that pattern paper. For the smaller rectangle of the sketch, I actually cut out a scallop square using one of Queen & Company's foundation dies, but I want it to be a rectangle. So I just cut off that bottom portion. I'm going to leave that little gap in between because it's going to be covered up by the sentiment and also the image. So there is that sentiment that's going to cover up part of that gap. This card is sprinkled with love. For the image of the card, I'm going to use the ice cream cone. I cut out the cone using some of the brown solids, and I love the little stitched detail on that cone. And this is going to be a double scoop cone because, you know, we need a little extra ice cream. So I'm just trying to figure out placement. I did have to scoot over that sentiment since I don't want my ice cream to cover up any of the words. So once all of that is in place, I can start adhering the ice cream scoops. And I cut out those 2 pieces using the outline dies. So the very top ice cream scoop is going to be the shaker portion. So go ahead and attach my foam. And I decided the top scoop of ice cream needed some chocolate fudge. So this brown piece of paper is actually the inside portion of the ice cream scoop. And I just held it up to that outside frame to cut along the very top, so then it looks like chocolate fudge is sort of drizzling along the very top ice cream scoop. For all of the shaker toppings, I kept them in just the pink and brown. I think that looked really nice with this card. So go ahead and glue my ice cream frame and then add my chocolate fudge on top. While I let that glue dry, I'm going to add a few other elements to the card just to finish it off. I have a small circle die I'm going to put above the sentiment, and then I have two small stitch hearts, and these are from Queen & Company's special delivery kit. I think it was the perfect size. So I cut one out in blue and then one in this darker pink, popped up the one in pink, and I just have it laying on top of that bottom portion of the cone. I'm going to finish off the card adding an assortment of Queen & Company bling, and since I want that chocolate fudge to look a little more realistic, I decided I'm going to use some glossy accents. So it's going to add a really lovely shine. So let's go ahead and fill that whole top portion, trying my best not to get any bubbles. So this is something you do need to let dry for quite a while before you touch it again. So I did make two cards using this sketch, and I just love how this one turned out. So now moving on to my next set of cards. This is a sketch from Queen & Company, and Queen & Company's sketches were designed to coordinate with their foundation dies. So it's really easy to pop together some cards if you own all of those foundation die sets. With all of the pink in the pattern paper, I wanted to make sure to do a card that was a little more on the masculine side. So I have two different pattern papers that I just cut at a diagonal, and it's okay to have that gap because it is going to be covered up. I'm layering this in some brown cardstock, and I had to peel it up because I didn't get it on very straight right away. I used some polka dot paper for this diagonal strip that goes across the card and just laid that on top, covering up that gap. And I could have layered that strip using some more of the brown cardstock, but I decided it still worked just fine without that extra layer. And I'm assembling one of the popsicles for this card. So I have the little stick. Decided to use a dark brown. I think the lighter brown didn't look quite right. And then I have the light blue outline die for the background. Now go ahead and fill up my shaker using some white, some pearlies, and then some of the yellow sprinkles that are included in the kit. I love the soft colors of this card, and it looks really nice with the contrast of that dark brown. So go ahead and add some liquid adhesive around that outside frame. I'll let that glue dry while I work on some other elements of the card. I've already gone ahead and stamped out the sentiment on a white piece of paper using a stitched banner die. This is "You Make Me Believe Anything is Popsicle." Isn't that fun? And then I used some glitter foam again. I don't know if that still works as a masculine card if you add glitter, but I liked the sparkle on there. So maybe that's just me. I need to quit adding sparkle to my cards because then it makes them a little too feminine, but I think it still works. And then I'll just finish off the card using an assortment of Queen & Company bling. And I had pulled out those yellow iridescent bubbles and then decided just to use blue colored bling this time. And I did end up making 3 cards using this sketch. I have a very feminine looking card, and then I still have that one a little on the more masculine side. At this point in the video, I believe I only had 2 full sheets of the pattern paper left. Everything else is just smaller scraps. So I'm going to be using a sketch from Mojo Monday. This is sketch number 322. The background paper is this beautiful pink plaid design. Layer all of this using some pink cardstock, and then the confetti paper, if you remember from a previous card, that is the piece that I cut out to use on another card. And it's funny, as I'm doing the voiceover and watching myself make cards, I could have done the same thing with this pink plaid paper. I could have cut the smaller portion out and been able to stretch that paper just a little bit further, but obviously I forgot, but that's all right. I'm going to use some of Queen & Company's Trio Trims. This is this beautiful pink that has an iridescent thread going throughout it. Adds a really lovely sparkle. So I just wrap that around that lower portion of the card. Adhered the ends using the red line tape, and then later on I will tie the bow once I decide if I want it on the right or left hand side. For this rectangle with the rounded corners, this is some of Queen & Company's solids. Decided to do it in this soft yellow. And since this pink twine has quite a bit of dimension, I'm going to use some foam dimensional tape just to even out that rectangle piece. Otherwise, there's going to be that big bump in the lower portion of it. So I just put a piece of foam tape above and below the twine and then put some more pieces on the rest of that rectangle. I'm going to be assembling another cupcake card. This one's going to have a nice bright blue frosting. And for this card, I'm not going to use it as a shaker. The dies work great for shaker cards, but you can also use them as non-shaker cards, which is a really nice way to stretch that kit. I cut out a stitched oval die cut with some of the pink solid color, and I'm going to stamp the sentiment in 2 different colors. One of the sentiments included in the kit has "Life is hard," and then there's 3 different matching sentiments to finish that little statement. So I'm using "Life is hard, cupcakes help." I'm just adding some small scraps of cardstock on that upper and right hand side edge of the oval just to keep it nice and even on the card. Now I'll finish off the card using an assortment of Queen & Company bling. I decided to add some of their heart bling right underneath the sentiment. It's fun that the heart bling has 2 different styles, one in a frosted color and the other more of a shiny. So I used 1 of each. And now the cupcake needs some kind of decoration. So I'm going to add some of the shaker toppings in the little confetti. I'm just going to glue them right onto the frosting. I think the plain frosting was just fine, but it adds just that little extra something to have some confetti or sprinkles on your cupcake. It's also fun to use some of the shaker toppings just as some extra embellishments on the card. So I did make 2 cards using this sketch. One of them is a non-shaker card and the other is 1 more of the shaker cards. Since there's a total of 21 foam and acetate pieces, I try to use as many as possible. So now moving on to my next set of cards. This is a sketch from OWH. This is number 192. And at this point, I don't have any more full sheets of pattern paper, but I have quite a few of these long, thin strips, about 2 inches wide. So this sketch was a great choice because you can have 3 different pattern papers that you don't need a very big piece of paper. So I'm going to layer all of this using some pink cardstock. I decided to put the busiest paper on that lower strip. I think you'll see most of it that way. Otherwise, it's going to be covered up by a lot of the other components on this card. That centerpiece, I'm just using another white pearlescent paper for that rectangle. I'm going to put a little scrap of solid cardstock on the upper and lower portion, keeping it all nice and even on the card. And then I'll go ahead and attach my card front onto a card base. And for this card, I'm going to assemble another one of the sundaes. At this point in the video, I've already used all 7 different images, so now I can repeat several of them. And this is going to be a non-shaker card again. I used some light blue solid paper for the ice cream dish. And then this one's going to be vanilla ice cream since I already did the chocolate. I have 3 different ice cream toppings. And even though it's not going to be a shaker card, I still like to have that frame piece since I like the stitching. Go ahead and glue on all of the different toppings. I have my fudge, my caramel, and my strawberries. I'm going to put my cherry on top, including the little tiny stem. And for the sentiment, I stamped this out on one of the stitched sentiment die cuts on the pink And I'm just using some foam squares on that left-hand side, always trying to keep everything nice and even on the card. And then I thought I'd add a little bow on the bottom portion of the dish. So this is some of that pink twine with that iridescent threading throughout it, and I just tied a bow and it adhered it right onto the card using a small glue dot. And then just a little extra embellishment. I have two small banner dies, one in the white pearlescent paper and then the other in just this pink cardstock. I cut the pink one just a little bit shorter and I'm just layering them on that upper right hand corner. I'll just finish off the card using an assortment of Queen & Company bling. I'm never sure exactly which bling I want to use, so sometimes I pull out more colors and then decide as I go. So there is my finished card, and I actually made 4 using this sketch. 2 of them with the little ice cream truck, which I also did one as a shaker and one as a non-shaker. I love making the shaker cards, but it's so much fun to have those non-shakers as well, and they are easier to put through the mail without paying any extra postage. And for that non-shaker ice cream truck, I did cut out that small little ice cream cone from one of the scraps of pattern paper just to add to the side of the truck. I thought that was cute. So now moving on to my next card, and I only make one using this sketch. This is a brand new sketch from Mojo Monday. This is number 530. I used the polka dot paper for the background and then one of the pink solids for this smaller rectangle. And again, I could have cut out that little portion out of the middle of the polka dot paper, but I didn't. And then for this strip going down the side of the card, this is just some tone-on-tone yellow paper in a nice plaid. This card is a great example of combining many different pattern papers, but not making it look too busy, since only that background paper has the busier patterns. This is also a fairly thick card, just with all of the layers. But it's still going to be less than 1/4 of an inch in thickness, and that's usually where you have to start adding that extra postage. So if I didn't add any bling to this card, it would still go through the mail pretty easily. So now for the background for my image, I'm going to use a scallop circle die cut. And I'm going to be making another one of the little ice cream floats. I cut out the glass using some light blue paper, and this one has vanilla ice cream. And I do have my little straw, and I don't want the straw to be visible through the glass this time, so I'm actually going to tuck it behind this outline die. So I did just cut off that lower portion just so it didn't add any extra bulk underneath this paper. I also want to have some chocolate fudge on the top of my ice cream. And it's nice that that topping used on the sundae works perfectly on this ice cream scoop as well. So I'm still going to glue on the little frame for the glass simply because I like that stitch detail. And now I'm going to add my sentiment in that lower left-hand corner. This is "Life is hard, ice cream helps." So I just add some foam dimensional squares on that left-hand side of the sentiment just to keep it nice and even. I'll go ahead and finish off the card with an assortment of bling. I keep reaching for those epoxy dots since they're so pretty. I think the blue and the pink are the colors that I've used the most so far. And then just one more finishing touch on this card. I wanted to make the glass look a little more realistic and add a little bit of sparkle. So I pulled out the Nuvo glitter drops. This is the white blizzard color. And I'm just going to fill in that whole inside portion of the glass. I'm not putting it on the outside frame piece, just on the inside. So you have to use quite a bit. I'm trying to spread it out fairly even. And then when it dries, it does crack just slightly, but I think that really adds to the look. So there is my finished card, and I did only make one using this sketch because I don't have a lot of paper left. So moving on to the next set of cards, this is a sketch from MFT. It's number 454. So out of a lot of the small scraps that I had left over, I used a stitched rectangle die. This is one of Queen & Company's, and I cut out all of these strips. And then I have a piece of white cardstock that I just put adhesive all over the front. So I'm just laying those strips side by side, trying to get them nice and snug next to each other. The very outside two pieces were slightly longer or slightly too wide, so I just trimmed those off. And then I took that whole square piece, cut it in half, so now I can make two cards with a little assortment of pattern paper. So I'm just putting that on some white pearlescent paper, layering it on some pink cardstock, and then I cut just that thin strip of paper out of some pink solids, and it'll work perfectly to cover up any of those edges on all of those pattern papers, so it'll have a nice clean look. And I won't be showing the process of assembling both of these cards. I just wanted to show that I got two cards out of those same strips by cutting it in half. So now I'll go ahead and start working on this card. Since this pink paper is fairly thin, I wanted to give it a little bit of dimension and stability. So I'm putting it on some white pearlescent paper. And then of course, for whatever reason, I put the adhesive on the pink side. So I just rub that off. Luckily it does come off fairly quickly if you catch it right away. Then I put it on the correct side. And then I decided I'm going to add some twine on top of that pink strip. So I just wrapped some Queen & Company pink twine around the card twice. I'll adhere those ends using the red line tape. And then I can put my card front onto a card base. Now I'll just slip that other piece of twine underneath the others and just kind of leave it there for now until I determine which side I'd like to put it on. So for this card I'm using the donut dies, however I'm going to make them cookies instead. So I didn't cut out that circle at all. So I have one, I guess more of a sugar cookie with the sprinkles on top, and then the other's a chocolate cookie with some pink icing. So I adhered the sugar cookie down first, just using some liquid adhesive, and then I'm going to pop up the brown or the chocolate cookie. Since it's going to go over the twine, I'm trying to make sure to leave that little gap so I don't get an extra little bump on my card. I have to keep pulling away some of the foam pieces because I put too many on. So once I got that nice and flat, add one more little piece underneath. Now I decided I'm going to put that bow on the right hand side by the cookie. I've already gone ahead and stamped out the sentiment on a stitched banner die cut. I'll just pop that up using some foam dimensional tape. And I did cut off the left hand side just to have it nice and flush on the edge. And then just adding some extra embellishments, using some more of the little hearts, and then also some small banners in that upper right hand corner. Pull out an assortment of Queen & Company bling just to finish off this card. I love how this one turned out. This is the first time I've tried this sketch. I didn't do an exact measurement on the width of those strips on the sketch because I think you can really just use what you have. It's just kind of the idea of having a variety of different pattern paper scraps on that bottom. So I did do two cards using this sketch. The second one I made using the popsicles. So now here is all of the pattern paper scraps I currently have left over. I'm using a sketch by Queen & Company to try to really finish off the rest of the pattern paper. So I used one of Queen & Company's foundation dies. It's this little square with the rounded corners. And I cut out 8 different pieces, and I'm just trying to arrange them so I don't have like 2 whites next to each other or 2 of the same shade of pink. Not always a lot of options when you only have so many pieces of pattern paper left. But now I'm going to go ahead and start adhering them to my card. I'll start with that top row, try to get it as nice and straight and even as possible. And then once I have those in place, then I can start building up the rest of those squares. You could do 9 if you want to make sure you have a little more even placement, but since you're not going to see the one in the center, it's not really necessary. So once I get all of those adhered, I can start working on the rest of the card. And I'm going to attach this piece onto some pink cardstock first. Then I used one of Queen & Company's tag dies, cut it out in this yellow color, and then I'm also going to make another ice cream cone. This is not going to be a shaker card, and I also wanted this ice cream cone to be just a little bit smaller so it wasn't hanging off of the tag very much. So the ice cream is the inside portion from the die, and then the cone I cut off the very top piece just to keep it the same proportion as the scoop of ice cream. So I just pop that up using some foam dimensional tape on top of the tag, and then I'm going to pop up that tag as well. So I'm covering up the hole in the tag so I don't feel I need to add any twine or anything there. But I did decide to add some twine on the upper portion of the card just for a little extra interest. So I'll just wrap it around the card twice. And I want it just slightly underneath the very top portion of the tag. So I'll go ahead and put my card front onto a card base before I finish off any more of this card. So now I'm just trying to figure out where to place this tag, and I want to put it a little higher, but the foam was in the way, so I did just rip off a few pieces. So I'll go ahead and tie my little bow in the upper left-hand corner. And I've already gone ahead and stamped out the sentiment. This is "You are the cherry on top." So obviously I'm going to be adding a cherry to this ice cream cone, otherwise that sentiment really wouldn't make any sense at all. I did layer that sentiment using some more of the pink cardstock, and I'll just pop that up using some foam dimensional tape. Adhere that to the bottom portion of the card, and now I'll be adding my cherry, and then also the little stem. And then I'll just use another assortment of Queen & Company bling, pulling out those epoxy dots in the candy swirl style. I love how this card turned out. I think a bright pink ice cream cone is just perfect. Not sure if that would really be a flavored cone or if it's just the color. I remember having colored cones when I was a kid. So there is my finished card, and that is my final card. So here is all of the pattern paper that I have left over. Not really that much. And this is all of the Solids 6x6 paper pack that I have left over since I used quite a bit throughout the video. In addition, I also used 5 sheets of 8.5 by 11 and 12 sheets of 12 by 12 solid colored cardstock. A total of 25 cards were made using Queen & Company's Sweet Shop kit. This kit is so adorable. I had so much fun using it. I do have links provided in the description box if you are interested in any of the products that I used. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.